The last decade has been a tumultuous time in Alberta. The energy industry shed tens of thousands of jobs when oil prices slumped back in 2014. Today, energy prices have soared to record levels, but the jobs haven't returned. And a major shift in government policy around resource development has left the industry wondering where it is going next. Even if Canada wanted to send Western natural gas by ship to Europe, there is no pipeline to get it to the East Coast. Cut off from new markets and feeling the squeeze from climate change, Canada's energy sector is in the midst of a major transformation as it tries to forge ahead. He grew up on a family farm near Hanna, Alberta. But after high school, Brian Corey chose to work in oil and gas.
I started pipe fitting and working in the oil industry. So I just followed that career path and eventually got me into operating.
His almost 20-year career has seen a lot of ups and downs, booms and busts again and again. But this time, this boom has not felt the same.
It's booming like crazy, but it's hard to tell. You know, oil's skyrocketing and you don't see it like from the other turnarounds.
And they'll use it to separate the oil from the gas.
Kevin Krausert knows why. Up until recently, Krausert was the CEO of Canada's largest privately owned drilling company. But then, he says the industry began experiencing an undeniable shift. This was no longer cyclical. The sector's entire structure had begun to change.
You know, the last downturn sort of in the 2015-2016 era, I think was unique because more than just it being a price cycle, there were drumbeats of decarbonization.
Rising greenhouse gas emissions triggered a shift in Ottawa away from traditional energy. Back in Calgary, that shift sent shockwaves through the industry.
And then you had a divestment movement of many institutional investors from the oil and gas industry, decreasing the value of a lot of oil and gas companies. And I think it's the existential crisis of our time.
The war in Ukraine and Europe's desperation to replace Russian energy would have been seen 20 years ago as an opportunity for Alberta to step in and help. But not this time.
I think, many players in the world are playing chess, and we seem to be playing checkers.
Arn Wenekers started in the Alberta energy patch, but left after prices and investment collapsed. He went to Qatar as an advisor on their massive LNG expansion.
75,000 jobs that pay $100,000 or more. I mean, that's a huge bite. Could we become a natural gas superpower in a short term? No, I don't think we could. Who's going to invest in Alberta in a natural gas field if you can't get it to market?
That will run a series of
Kevin Krausert decided to stay, but in 2020 he left the company his grandfather founded 80 years ago. You will now find him in this building.
How could we reduce GHG emissions from SAGD production for oil sands producers?
The downtown Calgary high-rise headquarters of the Energy Transition Centre.
We envision it to work as a data gathering solution.
On Thursday afternoons, you'll find it full of engineers. Day to day, they're employed by Suncor, Enbridge, TC Energy, and others. But every week, they come together to work on a goal to decarbonize the industry, and fast.
We're looking into a novel carbon storage technology, so trying to help solve some of the challenges around CCUS projects and moving those forward.
CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage, is a proven but expensive technology. It involves taking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it in the ground. The largest oil sands producing companies pledged to get to net zero emissions by 2050 using this technology.
Remember that for companies like ours, we're used to actually creating and producing something that we then sell. Taking something and putting it in the ground doesn't actually generate revenue. And so an awful lot of this kind of infrastructure is not revenue generating.
This was the Prime Minister last fall.
We need to bring people along, support them in the jobs they need to have, but also lower our emissions so we get to net zero. Indeed, the largest energy companies in this country are committed to net zero by 2050. And the way to do that is to all of us work together.
But when energy companies asked the government for direct financial support to build the carbon capture pipeline, they were told no by the new Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault.
We think that these companies, with making record level profit, should invest as well.
On the one hand, we're hearing that there's encouragement for the oil and gas sector to produce more so that we can get that energy that's needed in Europe over there. And on the other hand, we're hearing at the same time, emissions have to be reduced. Those two things can happen at the same time, but it has to be done in a thoughtful way.
These oil sands companies have come together and put together a strategy that makes them look like they're part of the solution, and that's what the oil sands pathway is. And they're doing it so that they can lobby government and they can get more subsidies.
Julia Levin is with Environmental Defense. She says public dollars are better spent on clean energy projects instead of CCUS.
The IPCC has warned, don't rely on carbon capture and storage. It is the most expensive, least effective form of emissions reductions. Don't rely on it.
The invasion of Ukraine is definitely demonstrating that countries cannot be complacent in terms of where their energy comes from.
But with the world likely to remain dependent on fossil fuels for at least the next decade or more, for the sake of global emissions, Kevin Krausert says the opportunity to decarbonize Canada's current industry cannot be ignored.
How do we, as we build resilience into a global energy mix, choose energy-producing partners that not just are investing heavily in decarbonization initiatives and planning on leading the energy transition, but also are producing it in a way that is responsible and in line with the values we've held dear for decades.